Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Washington University Danforth Campus 35th Annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Program. I am Amadi Muse-Morris, President of the Association of Black Students.
And my name is Rainan Miao, and I have the honor this year of serving as the Washington University Student Union President, the undergraduate student government. We are honored to serve as tonight's student co-hosts. On behalf of the Washington University faculty, staff, students, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Committee, it is truly our pleasure to welcome you to the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration. We appreciate you being with us this evening to reflect on the teachings and legacy of Dr. King. Tonight marks the 35th year that the Danforth campus has observed the annual commemoration. This event is a testament to the commitment of Washington University and the many individuals, organizations, student groups, and university partners who have dedicated their time, resources, and creativity to participate in planning and promoting this event. The theme of this year's celebration is based on a quote from one of Dr. King's early sermons. An individual has not begun to live until he can rise above the narrow horizons of his particular individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all of humanity. The quote is from the sermon Conquering Self-Centeredness, delivered by Dr. King at the Montgomery, Alabama, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church on August 11th of 1957. Dr. King goes on to say that one of the best ways to face the problem of self-centeredness is to, quote, discover some cause and some purpose, some loyalty outside of yourself, and give yourself to that something, becoming so absorbed that you give your life to it. In the sermon, Dr. King gives 3 examples from history of those who have done this. First is William Wilberforce's struggle, beginning in 1787 to abolish the slave trade and slavery in British overseas possessions. Second, Florence Nightingale's cause, nursing the wounded and becoming the founder of modern nursing in the 1860s. And third, Albert Schweitzer's early 20th century harsh criticism of European colonialism and imperialism in Africa. In the sermon, Dr. King suggests that a second way to rise above self-centeredness is by realizing that you are where you are today because somebody helped you get there. He states, quote, no matter where you stand, no matter how much popularity you have, no matter how much education you have, no matter how much money you have it because somebody in this universe helped you to get it. You discover that you have your position because of the events of history and because of individuals in the background, making it possible for you to stand there. On behalf of the 2022 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Committee, we celebrate Dr. King's teachings and invite each of you to challenge yourselves as we challenge ourselves to rise above our individual concerns to broader concerns and to recognize those who have made it possible for us to be here this evening. Thank you for celebrating with us, and we hope you are renewed by tonight's commemoration. We'll begin tonight's program with the Washington University Concert Choir, directed by Dr. Elizabeth Hogan, with Sandra Geary at the piano. Those who know Dr. King say that the great hymns and spirituals of the church helped carry him through troubled times. The choir will perform the traditional African-American spiritual Go Down Moses, arranged by composer, pianist, and conductor B.E. Boykin.
Oh
Thank you for that riveting performance. It is our pleasure to have with us this evening Dr. Ashante Bolton, Washington University Executive Vice Chancellor for Administration and Chief Administrative Officer. A valedictorian graduate of Vashon High School, Bolton grew up in St. Louis and left after high school to attend Alabama A&M University, where she obtained an undergraduate degree in psychology. She later obtained an MBA in corporate business and a doctorate in organizational psychology. Executive Vice Chancellor Bolton joined Washington University on July 1st of 2021 and is responsible for spearheading effective strategies and administration, including in the areas of information technology, human resources, public safety, procurement, supplier diversity, and Danforth campus operations and facilities. We will now have a greeting from Executive Vice Chancellor Dr. Ashante Bolton.
Hello, everyone. I am grateful to be with you all this evening. Let me begin with a warm and heartfelt welcome. And thank you so very much to Amadi and Rainin for hosting this important event. What a powerful and beautiful song. You know, the song we just heard represents the possibility of freedom, hope, and an escape from the bondages of slavery. It represents divine deliverance and renewal from oppression. And if it is true that knowledge is like a garden, then you must be intentional about the seeds planted and how you nurture them. Today, all of us come together to honor the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who made sacrifices and exuded courage in order to rise up against racism, segregation, and inequality. All of us at Washington University have a responsibility to do this work that helps to foster a diverse, equitable, and inclusive institution, community, and society. This means we together are always taking measures to engage, educate, and empower others as we continue to build on all history has taught us and keeping the charge set by Dr. King not so very long ago. This is ingrained in our mission and in our hearts. I always say the greatest leaders are leaders who lead with love. I know this can be hard, especially throughout the past few years when we have not only faced a global health pandemic, but also the historical pains of racism, laced with violence, hate, division, and brutality. We cannot let that hate overtake the truths we hold so deep in our souls to make a difference, to rise up for the greater good, and to lead with love. Nor shall we fall to the pool of fear, because fear is nothing more than an optical illusion to make you believe that you are not capable or ready for the task at hand. I know this to be true because each of you are torchbearers of light in your own right, and may nothing dim the flame for truth, equity, and justice that burns within you. This is what brings us together on an evening where we not only commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. King, but we also commemorate 35 years of coming together as a community to remember why we do the work we do, to remind us of our purpose as individuals and as an institution. As Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I am here with you and for you. Together, we can continue to stand strong. Let us honor a hero whose legacy lives on in each of us. His passion, love, and resilience can guide us to keep channeling the light in the road ahead. I love what was said about renewal. Remembering the life of Dr. King and gathering together gives us hope and energy to keep rising up. You can't always prepare yourself for every situation. Sometimes unexpected change happens and you'll need to maintain an adaptable mindset to explore the answers to how might we together and maintain an open channel of communication for oppressed, suppressed, or repressed voices to add to our vision forward. People will want to know what category of leader to put you in. I hope you will answer the question less with your words and more by your actions. The goal is not to stay on the good side of people with bad behaviors, but rather use your agency as a catalyst for truth-telling and positive change-making. Thank you. I'm looking forward to spending the time with you this evening, hearing from our incredible keynote speaker, Dr. John Baugh, and to working alongside each of you. Whether our impact lies within our institution, within the place we call home, the city of St. Louis, or on a broader scale, our collective purpose of progress matters. Please enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ashante Bolton. Andrew D. Martin assumed the duties of Chancellor of Washington University in St. Louis on June 1st of 2019. He earned his doctorate in political science from Washington University in 1998 and was a member of the university's faculty for 14 years, most recently serving as the Charles Nagel Chair of Constitutional Law and Political Science. He served as the founding director of the Center for Empirical Research in the Law from 2006 to 2014, as chair of the Department of Political Science and Arts and Sciences from 2007 to 2011, and as vice dean in the School of Law from 2012 to 2014, when he left to assume the role as dean of the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts at the University of Michigan. He is quoted as saying, quote, "I am the scholar, educator, and academic leader that I am today because of my experience at Washington University." When writing about diversity, Chancellor Martin has stated, quote, "As a community committed to the relentless pursuit of excellence, we must be a diverse community. Embracing diversity and inclusion is not just something we do because we should or because it's the right thing to do. It is essential to human flourishing and progress." It is an honor and pleasure for me to introduce the 15th Chancellor of Washington University, Dr. Andrew D. Martin.
Well, thank you very much, Rainin, for that introduction and for your contributions here tonight. And good evening to all of you, and thank you once again for joining us. I would like to acknowledge the many folks who helped prepare this event, as well as everyone who's been able to be here this evening. I am proud to be included in this annual week of remembrance of Dr. King and his legacy. While we may celebrate every January, I know that so many of the people at Washington University and in our St. Louis home pursue Dr. King's dream 365 days a year by working to advance equality, equity, justice, rest, and joy for Black people, and as Dr. King spoke, for all God's children. And while we all audaciously hope that one day society will have achieved Dr. King's dream, we also know there is much more work to do. On some days, that work can feel like one step forward, two steps back, and yet we passionately persist. To that end, I hope this time spent in remembrance inspires and energizes us for the work ahead. But also, I hope this time serves as a chance to celebrate those steps forward, because I have faith that we are bending the arc in ways that are obvious on some days and not so obvious on others. Every minute you spend in this work means something. Don't forget to celebrate the wins, and don't forget to rest. Our work on behalf of others requires us to acknowledge and honor our own humanity too. Recently, we had one of those 2 steps back days at WashU, 2 giant steps back. In December, we shared with the community that vandals had defaced a beautiful and meaningful mural on campus with despicable white supremacist words and imagery. Even a month later, it turns my stomach to think of such an incident taking place on our campus, or anywhere for that matter. I want to commend our students first for mobilizing so quickly to cover over the hateful graffiti. I also want to acknowledge the quick action of those Washington University police officers who were dispatched in investigation, as well as Dr. Ashante Bolton and Dr. Ana Gonzalez, who worked decisively to address the needs of the community. Each acted according to duty, but more than that, to their deeply held empathy, and I'm grateful and proud of that. To those awaiting an update on the incident, the crime is being investigated, and the authorities have asked us to refrain from sharing more information until their work is complete. What I can share, though, is that we are confident that the criminals will be held accountable, and we hope to have more information to share with you all soon. While statements from chancellors can't change the world, we as an institution can and do through our actions. I do want to take this opportunity to reiterate our institutional values. As I said in April of 2021, when our hearts were broken by a string of tragic incidents of lives ended or forever changed by racially motivated violence, we remain rooted in our core values. Especially in times of tragedy, uncertainty, and chaos, it is important for each of us to know these unyielding truths. We are a place that stands unequivocally against hate, racism, and discrimination in any form. We care deeply about those who are suffering. Because we care about each other, we are committed to putting our values into action however possible to help create needed change, both within ourselves as individuals and collectively within our community, country, and the world. And while I won't always step up to the mic when a tragedy occurs in our country or in our world, I will never stop working toward justice with the power that's been entrusted to me. In addition, the leadership of this university, with me leading the charge, will continue to put the safety and well-being of our students, staff, and faculty ahead of everything else, including short-term personal or university reputation. I hope you will come to trust that, and we intend to gain your trust by both our words and our actions. Thank you all again for being here, for your artful and heartfelt contributions, and for your commitment to Dr. King's dream. You teach me and inspire me daily. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Martin. Black Anthology, which began in 1989, is the university's oldest cultural show and is a student-written and student-run production. Each year, Black Anthology creates productions that highlight issues that affect the African-American community and the American community more broadly. We now welcome a performance by members of Black Anthology.
Eyes the total black being spoken from the earth's inside. There are many kinds of open, how a diamond comes into a knot of flame, how a sound comes into a word, colored by who pays what for speaking.
Some words are open, like a diamond on glass windows, singing out within the crash of passing sun. Then there are words like stapled wagers in a perforated book. Buy and sign and tear apart, and come whatever wills all chance, the stub remains, an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge.
Some words live in my throat, breeding like adders, others no sun, seeking like gypsies over my tongue to explode through my lips, like young sparrows bursting from shell. Some words bedevil me.
Love is a word, another kind of open. As a diamond comes into a knot of flame, I am black because I come from the earth's inside. Take my word for jewel in your open light.
I take my dreams and make of them a bronze vase, and a round fountain with a beautiful statue in its center, and a song with a broken heart, and I ask you, do you understand my dreams?
Sometimes you say you do, and sometimes you say you don't. Either way, it doesn't matter. I continue to dream.
That one day we will wish to be nothing more than what we are.
That we will see within ourselves the liberation of nations, of concrete.
That we will understand the inevitability in the lines of our hands. There is a war raging in our backyard. With it, my sister spirit burns. That the fire of my sister spirit will consume our enemies and burn our streets clean.
There's a system of mangled necks, whose heads speak with oracle tongues, that we should learn to walk with wounded feet.
That our eyes must be liberated from their granite, that our hands reroot themselves from the pools of acid rain.
There's a river forming in the bureaucrat's head, its water made from rusted milk, that we may understand this false constructed world and know holy things do not die.
Thank you so much, Black Anthology. That was so beautiful. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. John Ball is a Washington University Margaret Bush Wilson Professor in Arts and Sciences. He received a Bachelor of Arts in Speech and Rhetoric from Temple University and a Master's and PhD in Linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Ball holds appointments in psychological and brain sciences, linguistics, anthropology, education, English, and African-American studies. As a linguist, his research focuses on the social stratification of linguistic behavior in multicultural and multilingual nations. Dr. Ball coined the phrase linguistic profiling based on experimental studies where telephone callers seeking housing or other goods and services face discrimination due to stereotypes about their speech. His research also includes deaf communities and speakers of languages or dialects who lack fluency in the dominant linguistic norms of their respective societies. Dr. Ball is the author of numerous books and edited volumes. His latest book, Linguistics in Pursuit of Justice, Colorblind Ambition, presents a culmination of studies demonstrating how linguistics can promote justice. Dr. Ball was elected president of the Linguistic Society of America and began the 3-year term in January of 2021. The society plays a critical role in supporting and in disseminating linguistic scholarship to professional linguists and the general public. Dr. Ball has stated that one of the priorities during his presidency is to investigate ways to help historical Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and 2-year community colleges formulate strategies to create and support departments of linguistics. Please welcome Dr. John Ball.
Thank you so very much for that wonderful introduction. And for those of you who preceded me, this was an extraordinary opportunity for us all. And it's especially significant to me to have this opportunity in the second year of the pandemic, as we always start the spring semester with this important uplifting event. I realized when I found out that it would have been Dr. King's 93rd birthday that he was 21 years old when I was born. And his iconic work in civil rights was truly influential and impactful in my life as a teenager, watching the many situations in which he did his best to try to promote racial equality and justice, and to do so through nonviolence. He made clear in many of his speeches and writings that he was an influenced greatly by Gandhi's efforts in India. And as a young man, I remember witnessing the attack dogs in Mississippi and Alabama and the fire hoses on African Americans that we saw on the television. And I didn't understand why they wouldn't fight back. But with the benefit of time and hindsight, I now see the courage, the additional courage that it took for not only Dr. King, but all of the others that participated in the nonviolent struggle for racial equality in the United States. I've also lived long enough to realize things that were not immediately evident when Dr. King began his work. We had no idea at that time that he was under surveillance by the FBI and that J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, considered Dr. King's efforts to be a threat to the nation. And it's more than ironic that the idea of true equality in a country that celebrates liberty and justice for all would somehow be perceived as a threat. But we now know that Dr. King was not only under surveillance, but that there were efforts by the FBI and other agencies to try to discredit him and his work. We've now witnessed the full arc of history move to the point that there are many people who claim to embrace the mantle of Dr. King's vision and mission. And from time to time, I wonder if in fact he would celebrate all of the things that are now taking place in his name. I think he would surely celebrate some, but based on what I saw as a child, I think he would be disheartened by abuses of his name as others try to manipulate his legacy for their own gain. And when I was first asked to present remarks tonight, I did so wanting to call special attention to some of the lesser known champions of equality who were St. Louisans. And it's a pleasure to do that. But before turning to that, I want us to take a brief moment to reflect and acknowledge the grief and losses that we have just learned about from today and yesterday. Earlier this morning, Michelle Alyssa Go, an Asian American, was pushed in front of an oncoming subway car in Times Square. And she was killed by a deranged man. We don't know whether or not this was a hate crime based on her race, but the past year has shown far too many attacks on our fellow citizens of Asian descent. And those are the type of hate crimes that surely would have been something that Dr. King would decry. Similarly, yesterday we witnessed Jewish hostages being terrorized in a Texas synagogue. And that too represents a horrific event that is antithetical to the broad vision of equality and justice and liberty for all that Dr. King celebrated. In fact, Dr. King had an important ally, Dr. Rabbi Israel Dresner, who died most recently. Dr. King was a year older than Rabbi Dresner, but they were allies at a time when many rabbis would be reluctant to demonstrate the courage that Rabbi Dresner showed by being with Dr. King in many of the marches and putting his life on the line, promoting a Black and Jewish alliance that others at the time, didn't think was necessarily the best use of their time or efforts. And so it's with a bit of sadness that I want to begin by calling attention to these recent events. I think it's important to do so on this very special day before I look at some of the historical events in St. Louis that I think are noteworthy. So as I transition to those, I want to call attention to the Dred Scott trial and a lesser known historical fact that's often overlooked because of the Supreme Court ruling that denied Dred Scott access to the courts or justice. And it's the fact that the jury that voted in 1846, the St. Louis jury actually voted for Dred Scott's liberty. And it was the Supreme Court that overturned the will of that duly elected jury that receives a great deal of attention. But if you think back to what St. Louis was like at that time in 1846, as the nation was beginning to move westward, it's really quite remarkable that citizens of St. Louis at that time made the decision that a former slave who had once lived in freedom should be allowed to continue to live in freedom. That was extraordinary. And for that reason, I'm characterizing our courthouse as at least one of the birthplaces of racial justice in America. Many of you know that I serve as the Margaret Bush Wilson Professor, and that has been the greatest honor of my life. When I began this assignment in 2005, Margaret was still alive, and by coincidence of circumstance, she has a son who's my same age. And he and I have become friends, and their family has embraced me with such tremendous kindness and warmth that I feel as if I am a member of that family at this point in time. But Margaret was not only a civil rights leader in St. Louis, she was nationally and internationally recognized for her important work to advance justice. She was the first Black woman to chair the NAACP. As you can see on the slide, she was the second Black woman to pass the state bar exam in Missouri. But of significant importance to one of the most important Supreme Court rulings ever given, she was one of the principal attorneys in the famous Shelley v. Kramer case in 1948, which got rid of racial covenants in housing contracts that were so long responsible for perpetuating racial segregation and not allowing African Americans to gain the wealth that was associated with simply owning a home that could increase in value. I will, to my dying day, cherish not only the time that I shared with Margaret, but this assignment as the Margaret Bush Wilson Professor. It has changed my life in ways that I will forever be grateful for. I also followed in the footsteps of one of the iconic leaders in Black studies, Professor Robert Williams. Bob was a transformative social scientist, trained in psychology. Like the Chancellor, he received his PhD from Washington University in psychology. He went on to become the founding director of African and African American Studies. And then by coining the term Ebonics, he had an impact on my own field of linguistics that exceeded his work in psychology. And his work in psychology challenged the racial bias in standardized testing. And he came to be one of the champions and proponents of reforming standardized tests so that they could become culturally beneficial and supportive and at least attempt to be far more fair than they were in the past. And it's thanks very much to leaders of the university that on April 15th, we will be unveiling a posthumous portrait of Dr. Williams, and his family will be in attendance. And I want to thank all of those who have been responsible for allowing the Department of African and African American Studies to honor his legacy in that way. He is a scholar of remarkable distinction and a St. Louisan of longstanding who has championed justice nationally and internationally. I would also like to call attention to a lesser known fact about the Danforth Foundation. The Danforth Foundation was closed in 2011, but prior to my own move to St. Louis, I first became aware of the Danforth family in terms of their philanthropic largesse based on the number of young African-American scholars who were Danforth Foundation fellows. The Danforth Foundation supported important groundbreaking research on justice, religious equality, education, and much more. And the number of African-American scholars who earned their PhD as a direct result of the Danforth Foundation support far exceeds St. Louis, was tremendously beneficial to the nation. And several of the scholars who received those fellowships were international scholars of color from abroad. It's a remarkable national and international legacy promoting equality that's not well known. And those of us at Washington University know well the generosity of the Danforth family and what they've done for our campus. But I wanted everyone to know of their family history in this regard. So far, my remarks have concentrated on St. Louisans who have made important contributions to justice and equality. And with the exception of Senator Danforth, who is still with us, those who I have cited thus far are no longer with us to share in this celebration. But I'd like to close by celebrating and giving a shout out to one of our own living legends. Adrian Davis, my colleague and friend, is an impactful scholar currently working on issues of justice, equity, and equality. And she also served this university for 10 years as vice provost or vice chancellor, and in so doing, dramatically increased the number of scholars from diverse backgrounds, not only my fellow African Americans throughout the university, but scholars of color of Latino descent and Asian Americans. Her research, if I can encapsulate it, focuses primarily on matters of justice as they impact different domains: race, sexual issues, economics, housing, employment. She teaches courses on contracts, but she has never, ever given up the quest to use her training in law to advance the human condition and equality for others. And Adrian, I don't know if you're watching, but if you are, I know that this caught you by surprise. And to those who invited me, one of the things that I want to celebrate is that champions of equality are still with us, and we have one of the finest on our faculty. And with that, I will stop sharing and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. John Ball. For our final musical selection, we have another group of very talented Washington University students. Joseph Mosby is a first-year student currently studying within the Department of Music at Washington University, pursuing his interest in composing among other passions. He is an aspiring composer and also hopes to have a career writing, performing, and recording various musical works that also span many different genres and spaces. Joseph will perform his song Entropy with Kyle Lombard on violin, Jane Price also on violin, Amy Greenhall on viola, Kenneth Culosa on cello, and Sarah Johnson on piano.
Days, 2 weeks, a month, a year, I'm done. Take a seat and shed a tear. It's one too many compromises. All this blue light burns my eyes. It's just such a shame I lost the game again. Knock me out and please just call me when you know this window's closes. I lose focus. Sometimes I feel like I'm going nowhere, cruising way too fast. I don't wanna lose this, no fair, gotta make it last. When did it become so hard to run the race? It's everything I wanted, yet here I am, trying harder than ever to fly. Oh, just try. Another night, I think I might be wrong about my life and where I might belong. Could I go try again, or am I stuck here till the end? I've got all the time to use and none at all, cause while we could be great, I just might fall. It sucks sometimes, I know, and right when my face hits the ground, it just feels like I'm going nowhere, cruising way too fast. I don't wanna lose this, no fair, gotta make it last. When did it become so hard to run the race? It's everything I wanted, yet here I am, trying harder than ever to fly. Oh, just try. Starts from just the smallest seed. A bit of confidence is all I need. So much left to do. It all depends on you. There's so much left to say. So can you find the way? Hey, I don't want to be another painful memory, with all of my missed potential staring back at me. When did it become so real? I try to feel the spark that I've been missing, and it's still there, tucked under the entropy of life. Oh, just try.
Thank you so much, Joseph, Kyle, Jane, Amy, Kenneth, and Sarah. I am happy to also introduce Reverend Callista Isabel, the Washington University Director for Religious, Spiritual, and Ethical Life. Reverend Isabel's office supports the religious, ethical, and also spiritual life on campus, including interfaith understanding, dialogue, and pastoral care. An ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Reverend Isabel earned a Master of Divinity degree from the Yale Divinity School and a certificate from the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. Reverend Isabel will also provide our closing remarks as well.
Thanks so much, Amadi, and to all of the inspiring musicians and speakers so far tonight. Each year around this time, I hear people speculating on questions like these. What would the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. do if he were alive today? What would he say? What protests might he be leading? What causes would be heaviest on his heart? What prayers would he be praying? So friends, as we channel the many reflections we've heard tonight, I invite us to consider not only what Dr. King might do, but what he would have us do here and now in the coming days, weeks, and months. What are you empowered to say and do? Whose voices are being silenced by white supremacy and other systems of oppression? And in what ways might we amplify these voices, crying out into the wilderness for justice, equity, and peace? What kinds of trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble, to use that beloved phrase of John Lewis, might we need to get into these days? Which injustices keep you up at night? What can we do together? Who can we be as a community together? Dr. King witnessed and experienced deep human suffering, oppression, and discrimination, yet he refused to surrender his hope. So hold on to what is giving you hope and life these days, as we together continue down the long road toward equity, justice, and peace. May our commemoration tonight inspire and challenge us as we remember the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Isabel. Now we would like to also take a moment to recognize the members of the 2021-2022 Danforth Campus Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration Committee for their time and also effort in planning this evening's events. The committee members are Brenda Archie, Gail Boker, Jacqueline Carter, Rudolph Clay, and also Phyllis Johnson. We take this moment to also thank tonight's speakers, performers, the Washington University Academy for Diversity, Equity, and also Inclusion, and the Deaf Way Interpreting Services. We thank you for allowing us to also be your co-host for the 35th Washington University Danforth Campus Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Commemoration. We wish you a good night. Thank you.